We don't need to talk about the tier 1 guys. You start them regardless. Maybe the only thing we can say is welcome Joe Mixon. I believe this is first time in tier 1. Obviously over 30 touches last time they played the Colts. And he is a true 3-down bell cow going into the future. Going down to tier 2 will be led off with Jahmyr Gibbs. With Gibbs, he would be a tier 1 running back if it wasn't for the fact that I do think Montgomery will be back into this offense this week. Montgomery being healthy obviously is going to take some of these goal line touches. And at the same time, it will limit the overall upside from a raw touches per game perspective that you should get from Gibbs. Now, I still think Gibbs is the more dynamic back. I still think Gibbs will have the larger role as a receiver. I still think Gibbs will have red zone utilization. So I still think Gibbs is a top 10 running back in fantasy in a full PPR format every single week. Going up against the Tennessee Titans, you have an implied team total of 28 points. And right now, sportsbooks have this as the largest spread of the week right there with the Baltimore Ravens and Cleveland Browns. Now, going over to our next RB, we will be looking at Kenneth Walker. Now, Kenneth Walker is playing the Buffalo Bills. And for that reason, I think you could make an argument potentially to move Walker a little bit lower than this. But if you're looking over the past 4 weeks, you've seen 33, 14, 20, 23 points. And you've seen this in environments in which the Seattle Seahawks win. They're able to run the ball in the second half. And you've seen this in environments where the Seattle Seahawks get smoked. Geno Smith has to drop back 40, 50 times, and Walker only has 5 carries, but the man gets 8 targets, 7 receptions, and 57 receiving yards. So it does appear that Kenneth Walker is straight up matchup proof. In better matchups going into the future, I do think that you could say that Kenneth Walker is potentially a tier 1 RB. Now, going over to our next running back, we are going to be looking at Bijan Robinson. I know people want to get super upset that we continue to rank this guy as a top 10 option. I don't freaking care. We've talked about it all year now. You have the consistent usage as a receiver where we can go through just week to week and look at this type of consistency. 5 targets, 2 targets, 4 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets. I mean, the man is seeing over 18 opportunities per game. This is a pretty good offense here in Atlanta. Now, I will say they are actually dogs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And with that in mind, I'm probably going to be a little concerned that this could be a game in which you have to see Kirk Cousins just drop back to pass a ton. Now, they are favored by about 2.5 points over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you could reasonably see Bijan Robinson handle a massive workload in the second half. Now, going over to our next player, we are going to be looking at Alvin Kamara, and with Kamara, a report just came out saying that he has a broken hand. With this, it wasn't a follow-up saying, yeah, he's going to miss this week. Of course, no. People were acting like this man's going to keep playing. He was saying that he was playing with broken ribs earlier in the season. Now he's playing with a broken hand. I'm not putting him this low in the rankings for those reasons. I'm putting him this low in the rankings strictly because you have Spencer Rattler at quarterback. This does project to be a bottom 3 offense in the NFL this week against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Kamara still remains an absolute must-start running back, even with this offense being absolutely garbage. Because if you go over the past month, you've seen 9 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets, and 7 targets. So the receiving usage is still there. So in a full PPR format, he just gives you a crazy high floor. The worst game that you've had all season is 8.5 fantasy points. And he is currently the 2nd running back in fantasy in total points scored so far this season. Devon Achane will be extremely high in the rankings this week in comparison to what he has done over the past 4 games, where we go and look at the games with no Tua, where you've seen 8.8 fantasy points, 5.9 fantasy points, 2.7. That was the game he left early and doesn't really count. But this past week, 10.5. Like, Devon Achane has been horrendous. And in some of those weeks, you had no Raheem Mostert either. So actually, Achane was up there with a career high 73% of the snaps in weeks 3 and 4, and the man was a bum. But with that being said, if you are looking at this Miami Dolphins offense, sportsbooks are giving them an implied team total of 25 points. They are currently 3.5 point favorites over the Arizona Cardinals. So what this means is we are being told right now, yes, Tua is officially playing. And yes, we should operate under the assumption that this is yet again a top 10 NFL offense, or at least that's the data that we're getting from NFL Sportsbooks right this second. Now, Jonathan Taylor will be our next back. With Taylor, it's very difficult to rank him, right? Because if he plays and he's 100% healthy, he should be higher in these rankings. Like, you go through and look at what he's done healthy, 10 points, 15 points, 26 points, about 20 points the final week before the ankle injury. But we have not seen Jonathan Taylor since week 4. He's missed over the past 3 weeks. The initial report with the ankle sprain was saying, he's going to miss a week or 2. So he's already behind schedule. They didn't put him on the IR. If he did miss this week, that'd be the 4th consecutive week. So you'd assume that they should have just put him on the injured reserve. But Jonathan Taylor back at practice on Wednesday. I'm kind of assuming that he will play, but I mean, the Colts are 5.5-point dogs here to the Houston Texans anyway. So I think you could be a little bit conservative with Jonathan Taylor's first week back in. Now, I do want to reiterate with Jordan Mason, this is an absolute must-start running back until McCaffrey comes back. Now, don't convince yourself that, McCaffrey's going to be here, but the Niners still want to go with Mason. No, when McCaffrey's back in this offense, even if it's a committee, Jordan Mason will not be startable. He'll have no receiving usage. McCaffrey will have the goal line role. So Jordan Mason, it's a very binary range of outcomes. You're either looking at games going into the future with no Christian McCaffrey, and in that case, Jordan Mason is a player that you could pencil in to be a running back 1 with relative ease, or McCaffrey's back in and he's just a handcuff. But this week, you have no McCaffrey. You have a strong matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys. You have no Ayuk. You potentially have no Debo. You potentially have no Jennings. So at this point, I mean, it's very difficult to see how the Niners put points on the board, but sportsbooks are giving them a 25-point implied team total. They are 4.5-point favorites over the Dallas Cowboys. So I think a lot of these points get funneled through Jordan Mason. Please start him if you got him. And also, if you have Underdog Fantasy, I actually just got them to agree to give everybody that has ever used code FLOCK on Underdog a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard for Monday night. So, of course, thank you, Underdog Fantasy. I really do appreciate that. And if you wanted to pair up that Malik Neighbors pick on Monday night with something this weekend, I would be looking at Jordan Mason to score a touchdown against this Dallas Cowboys defense. And if you're not already on Underdog, you can still get that Neighbors free pick, and you can get an additional free pick if you're a new user with promo code FLOCK. With the link in the description and comment section, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. You'll get that free Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard, a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard, and a free team review we are doing in the live stream every single night. Just make sure you go through the link in the comment section or description and use code FLOCK. But let's move over to our next option here, which will be David Montgomery. Now, obviously, I'm maybe a little bit hesitant ranking Montgomery here just strictly because we don't know if he is good to go yet. He is dealing with a knee injury, but from everything I've read, doesn't sound super serious. Sounds like David Montgomery should be playing. Going back to what we were talking about previously, this game has the highest spread of any game in the NFL, where right now the Detroit Lions are 10.5-point favorites over the Tennessee Titans. So base assumption here is that the Lions are just going to be running the ball over and over and over again. Montgomery is, just absolute hammer. Has been hyper efficient behind the league's best offensive line. Has been just a touchdown machine. Right now Montgomery is the 13th best running back in fantasy so far this year. Now, Josh Jacobs will be our next guy. Jacobs finally cracked 20 fantasy points this past week. And we've been saying it for quite some time now to be buying low on Jacobs just because my lizard brain sees this as a running back with a 3-down workload that's in one of the league's best offenses. You go over and look at what sportsbooks are projecting out this week. They are yet again projecting out the Packers to be one of the league's best offenses with an applied team total of 26.5 points. They're going up against a Jacksonville Jaguars defense that has been pretty damn bad so far this season, where the Packers are favored by about 4.5 points. And I understand that, yes, Jacksonville looked a lot better against New England this past week, but that was the New England Patriots. I think it's going to be a very, very different story here. Going over to our next option, we are going to be looking at James Cook. With James Cook, this is a running back that only played 53% of the snaps against the Titans. You actually had Ray Davis mixed in. Now, I think you need to ask yourself, okay, is this because Ray Davis showed enough in week 6 against the Jets where Ray Davis is going to have a serious workload going into the future? Or you need to ask yourself, is it because James Cook may not have been fully healthy and they blew out the Tennessee Titans, so there's no need to really risk anything? To be honest with you, I don't really know the answer to that question. I'm looking at this going, oh, okay, well, the Bills are favored by 3 points, applied team total over 25 points, top 10 offense in the league. James Cook has receiving upside. James Cook, we had seen in the past this season, go out there and average, 12, 13, 14 carries per game. So I like the spot against the Seahawks. I like the offense. I'm hoping that maybe he takes a little bit more from Ray Davis, his second week back from injury. Aaron Jones will be our next play. If you are looking at Aaron Jones, to be honest with you, this is laughable. I need to put Aaron Jones ahead of James Cook. I will update that right now because with Aaron Jones, the workload is safer. Not only is the workload safer as a rusher, he has more red zone usage. You're not expecting that Sam Darnold is going to be vulturing many rushing touchdowns the way that you would have from Josh Allen. And Aaron Jones is used more as a receiver. The Vikings actually have a slightly higher implied team total this week. The Vikings are also favored by about 3 points over the Los Angeles Rams on Thursday night. So Aaron Jones should actually be ahead of James Cook in these rankings. Obviously, Aaron Jones has been an absolute crusher and is somebody that you need to start now that he's fully healthy. Now, there's been one running back that I've actually managed to call right so far this season. One of the very, very few right calls that we've had is, I know when to start Javonte Williams. Not only have we been crushing it in the videos, but also in the Flock League as well. If y'all been watching, we've started Javonte twice this season. I started Javonte Williams against the Raiders back in week 5, 16 points, and against the New Orleans Saints in week 7, 26 points. Now, is it because I'm some genius? No. It's because I am very willing to understand that sportsbooks know more than I do. You don't want to be playing Javonte Williams in an environment in which the Denver Broncos are going to get blown out. And instead, you want to be playing him in a game where the Denver Broncos should win. And if you look at this game here against the Carolina Panthers, I was shocked. And I was shocked to see that Denver is favored by 9.5 points here over Carolina. The only offenses that sportsbooks are giving a higher total to this week than the Denver Broncos are the Vikings, the Texans, the Packers, the Ravens, and the Lions. Denver is tied with the Kansas City Chiefs as the 6th highest projected offense this week. Javonte is an absolute must-start running back. If you have him, you get him in. Obviously, if you're a juggernaut playing in a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, then maybe there you reevaluate and you go based off your team. But for like me in the Flock League, where it's a 12-team format where you start 2 flex spots, there I could not be more excited to start Javonte Williams in this matchup. J.K. Dobbins is in a matchup going up against the Saints where Javonte blew up last week. This week, you are looking at the Los Angeles Chargers as 7.5 point favorites here over this New Orleans Saints team with no Derek Carr and with no hope to move the ball down the field. And we have seen when the Chargers get out to an early lead and they can take control of a game, which is right now what's projected to happen in this Chargers game this week, that they are looking to just run the ball over and over and over again. I understand this past week it was a little bit disappointing. We are expecting Dobbins to have a much bigger performance against the Cardinals where the Chargers lose the game. They can't establish the run the way that they wanted to. But here I think it's going to be a much better spot for Dobbins. Now, DeAndre Swift is a running back that's going into the bye, scores 29 points, 20 points, and 22 points. Now, this week, you are going up against a Commanders team that has no Jaden Daniels, so the Bears are actually favored by about 2.5 points. So I'm going to go ahead. I will start DeAndre Swift with confidence. I have Swift in the Flock League, and I'm going to be honest with you, I actually may look to start him this week, maybe even the week after. But if you look at the stretch of games that DeAndre Swift has near the end of the season, his schedule is about to get absolutely brutal. So I actually wouldn't mind saying that in a specific situation, you could look to sell high on DeAndre Swift after this week. But I do expect the 20 opportunities to be there in a good environment where the Bears do project to be an average offense this week against what should be a below average team. Now, going over to our next back, we are going to look at Kareem Hunt. I really didn't know how to rank Kareem Hunt's last week. I didn't know what the split was going to be. Obviously, before the bye, the man saw 27 carries. But now we actually have a 2-game sample of Kareem Hunt going for over 20 opportunities. It looks like a very safe ranking going into the future to assume that Kareem Hunt is the 3-down back. This is a game in which the Kansas City Chiefs are currently favored by 9.5 points over the Las Vegas Raiders. So we should presumably expect the Chiefs to look to run the ball over and over and over again against a Raiders team that has given up on the season. Kareem Hunt doesn't have a massive role as a receiver, but still, if you're going to get 20 carries in what projects to be a borderline top 5 offense in the NFL this week in a great matchup, I think you go with it. James Conner will be our next back. James Conner here going up against the Miami Dolphins. You actually have the Cards as 3.5-point dogs. Now, obviously, Conner really gets there last week at the end of the game, especially with the long reception to put the Cardinals in a perfect spot. I mean, James Conner had a total of 152 yards. But this is maybe the issue that you have with James Conner, particularly in a full PPR format, is when the receiving usage isn't there, like the 152-yard performance turns into 17.2 points. Especially knowing that Kyler will take a rushing touchdown or two. It's a spot that's a lot easier in a non-PPR format where you don't have some of these other running backs, such as Javonte Williams racking up a bunch of receptions that just artificially vaults him ahead of James Conner. But it's not the best matchup on paper, and Conner doesn't have the receiving usage that gives him some crazy high floor. Bijan Robinson will be a running back that's usually a lot higher than this in these rankings. However, with that being said, this week you actually have no Jaden Daniels, and at the same time, you have a tough matchup against the Chicago Bears. I'm assuming that Bijan Robinson will continue to get healthier as time goes on. You can start him. I just wouldn't expect the usual 20-plus points. I think more so you're going to get what's been in line over the past 2 weeks that he has played, which has been fine, hovering around 13, 14 points per game. I just think you have to have realistic expectations. Tony Pollard will be our next running back. And to be honest with you, I would not mind if you wanted to go over to Underdog and look at the Tony Pollard for lower than 60.5 rushing yards. The reason with this is right now you're going up against a Detroit Lions defense that has been a pass funnel that has only allowed teams to drop back to throw the ball. They have shut down opposing running backs time and time again. If you are looking at sports books, you have an implied team total of 17 points. You are 10.5-point dogs. This is the largest spread of any game this season. So this Tennessee Titans offense looks like they're giving up trading Hopkins. This is a running back that has a brutal matchup that's also in a game environment in which they probably can't run the ball due to game script, plus the matchup, like we already mentioned. So Pollard, even though you have no Spears and the opportunities should be there, bad offense where I think it is tough to be super excited about him. And like I said, I think I would even look at the lower than 60.5 rushing yards. Now, it seems crazy to have Chuba Hubbard this low in these rankings. And honestly, if you wanted to put Hubbard higher, I'm not going to fault you because he has been an absolute crusher so far this season. I mean, he has gone through and he has given you 27, 22, 17, 15, 11 points since Andy Dalton has taken over. Now, with that being said, a couple different things. Let's plot out a trend line. 27 points, 22 points, 17 points, 15 points, 11 points. That is straight downhill. Just to point it out. Doesn't mean a ton, but it is funny to point out. And two, this is a team that is switching over to Andy Dalton. Now, what we had come to be used to is sportsbooks putting out a line for the Carolina Panthers where maybe they project to score 22 points. Maybe they project to score 23 points. Here, this week, they're projecting the Panthers to score 16. The only offense that projects to be worse than the Panthers this week with Bryce Young under center is actually going to be the New York Giants. You have the Panthers tied for what you should expect with the Las Vegas Raiders. So similar to Tony Pollard, I mean, this is a running back that is going to have all the opportunity in his backfield, but he's going to be in a garbage offense with a garbage matchup and probably a team that can't rely on the run. Now, Chase Brown will be our next man here. I mean, if you're looking at Brown, back-to-back weeks with over 50 snaps. So for me, I think this means baseline expectation going into the future is Chase Brown is the starting running back in a great offense. This week, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, you actually have sportsbooks going through and putting the Cincinnati Bengals with an implied team total about 24.5 points. That is right behind teams like the Niners, Miami, right ahead of teams like the Jets, as well as the Los Angeles Chargers. You actually have the Bengals only favored by about 1.5 points. And it's not like Chase Brown has taken over and he's been the workhorse in this offense. It's more so that Chase Brown's come through and Chase Brown's been a 60-40 type split. Najee Harris will be our next running back. With Najee, this is actually a very good matchup going up against the Giants. You are 6.5 point favorites, so you should be able to run the ball in the second half, which is what we know the Steelers want to do. And at the same time, Russell Wilson's good for Najee Harris. Russell Wilson's not like Justin Fields, where he's going to be vulturing rushing touchdowns, where he's not going to check the ball down very often. Now, the issue with this is if you are looking at what you have with Jaylen Warren coming back in, we have actually seen the usage as a receiver just completely evaporate for Najee Harris. I mean, you'd be lucky to get 2 to 3 targets out of this backfield in the direction of Najee, where Jaylen Warren is now seeing 51% of the snaps in this backfield. So, it's a great matchup. I think Najee will actually be ranked lower than this in our rankings going into the future. Rico Dowdle will be our next play. If you were looking at Dowdle, I don't know. For me, this is a very clear running back in what should be an okay offense in most weeks. But here, this week in particular, where you are going up against the San Francisco 49ers, it's a spot where I personally would look to avoid. Going down to our next tier, we're going to have Nick Chubb here at 27. With Nick Chubb, he is the clear starter in Cleveland, but also the Cleveland Browns are 9.5 point dogs against the Baltimore Ravens. Probably not going to be able to run the ball a ton, and at the same time, Chubb's not going to have high target rate. Looking at Tank Bigsby, obviously Bigsby would be much, much higher than this if you were to have no Travis Etienne. But for right now, I am expecting that Etienne should be good to go. Rachaad White will be our next running back. With Rachaad White, I understand he was great this past week in a game that was just a complete shootout with the Baltimore Ravens. However, with that being said, I am a little bit concerned in which you may end up getting a 3-man running back by committee still here with Bucky Irving as well as Sean Tucker. Ramondre Stevenson is also in a 3-man running back by committee. I know a lot of people are very excited about Drake May, and Drake May looks great, and I think that he does have a very bright future with New England. But at the same time, I want to just be realistic where sportsbooks are putting the Jets as 7-point favorites. It's a very tough matchup. The only offenses that project to be worse than the Patriots this week are the Titans, the Saints, the Panthers, the Raiders, the Giants. Not super excited about any of those running backs. I mean, we can put, say, Alexander Madison as our next guy. Jahmyr White even played this past week. Jahmyr White was an absolute 0. Tyrone Tracy is going to be much higher than this in my rest of season rankings, but this was a bad offense to begin with. Plus, you sprinkle in some offensive line injuries, and you have a matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now, sportsbooks are putting the Giants as the worst offense in the NFL this week with an applied team total of 15 points. Now, it definitely does appear that Tracy is the starter over Singletary. I would just rather not start any running back in this Giants backfield, especially this week. Travis Etienne will be our next guy. Etienne is in a range where you can't cut him, but I'd rather not start him. Zach Moss, I think he's more so just a premium handcuff back at this point with the small role. Raheem Mostert, kind of the same thing. Bucky Irving, kind of the same thing. Jaylen Warren, the same thing. Austin Eckler, you get a floor, but not much more. But really, yeah, that last tier of guys are just the premium handcuff RBs that should have some opportunity, but nothing that gets you really excited. But I think that's all I have for you. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Of course, make sure you take advantage of that free pick I got y'all. I mean, it doesn't matter if you signed up to Underdog 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, yesterday, today, tomorrow. If you use code FLOCK, you'll have that Malik Neighbors free pick on Monday. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy and use code FLOCK, you will get an additional free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard as well, plus that 50% deposit bonus. Plus, on top of that, a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog Fantasy account. That way I can hook you up with that free team review. But thank you again. I really appreciate you and really hope I get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.